The latest installment of the Wilderness Survival series has just dropped, and it's kicking off with a bang. A massive $500,000 prize is up for grabs, but it won't come easy. This time, the challenge takes place in the Arctic Circle of northern Canada. Home to over 3,000 polar bears, 40,000 massive moose, and countless fish species, this frozen wilderness isn't for the faint of heart. And let's not forget the wolves, numbering in the thousands, fierce and bloodthirsty, they roam the land with deadly intent. Winter here is brutal, with thick snow blanketing the ground for 8 straight months. Temperatures can plummet to a bone-chilling -40 degrees Celsius. To make it worse, there are stretches of 24 hours without a glimpse of the sun. This may very well be the toughest survival challenge ever attempted. Are they ready for it? The first contestant to appear is Isaiah, a 36-year-old park ranger and captain in the National Guard's Air Force unit, responsible for executing rescue missions during major disasters. After multiple failed fertility treatments in hopes of having a child, Isaiah and his wife were left emotionally and financially drained. Their life savings are gone. Winning the $500,000 prize could change everything for his family. After landing in the Arctic wilderness, Isaiah scans his surroundings carefully. His priorities are clear: find a place to set up camp, locate water, and search for food. He enters a dense forest filled with towering spruce trees. As he makes his way deeper into the woods, he spots wolf tracks by a nearby riverbank. That's not a good sign, especially for someone alone, without a fire. An encounter with a hungry pack could quickly turn deadly. But the danger doesn't stop there. Not long after, Isaiah discovers massive grizzly bear tracks on the ground. Even more alarming, there are signs of a cub nearby, a clear warning that a protective mother could be close. This place is no safe haven, and Isaiah knows it. William, 49 years old, is the next contestant to enter the survival competition. He's a fisherman with 35 years of experience. After carefully observing the surrounding environment and selecting a location to set up camp, he chose not to immediately build a shelter. Instead, he headed to the lakeshore to catch some fish. One of the 10 items he brought with him was a fishing net. He wasn't sure if that was the best choice, but if he managed to catch fish, he'd be the first contestant to secure food on the show. Besides being a skilled fisherman, William is also an experienced hunter. If he could win this competition, his dream is to move his family to a quiet coastal town with fewer people, where they could live a peaceful life together. Once the fishing net was set, he started looking for a place to build his shelter. Due to the high number of bears in the area, building a secure and sturdy shelter was his top priority. After more than 2 hours of hard work, exhaustion began to set in. He took a short break and decided to check on the fishing net. And just as he'd hoped, within a short time, William had caught a big fish, officially making him the first person this season to catch food. But just as he was pulling the fish onto the shore, he slipped, letting the fish escape back into the water. It was a heartbreaking moment. William couldn't believe his eyes. All that effort, and in an instant, it was gone. In front of you is Cubby, 34 years old, currently working as a housekeeper. Tired of the noisy city life, he and his wife decided to sell all their valuable belongings and move to the wilderness to settle down. If he wins this competition, Cubby plans to use the prize money to treat his wife's illness and improve his family's quality of life. After landing, the first thing Cubby did was start building a shelter. After all, no one wants to sleep out in the open when living in bear territory. Unexpectedly, he spotted a small squirrel and immediately decided to hunt it. But the squirrel escaped, and in the process, he damaged one of his precious arrows. Cubby deeply regretted the hasty decision, blaming himself for being too impatient. He returned to focusing on building the shelter. First, he gathered some dry wood, lit a fire, and boiled a pot of water. Then, in the open space he found, he used rope and a thermal tarp to construct a temporary shelter. Eventually, he plans to find a better location and build a more permanent home. Dub, 44 years old, is a true wild hunter. He interacts with nature almost every day. Hunting, trapping, and fishing are all second nature to him. For Dub, joining this competition is simply about changing locations. He chooses to live a solitary life focused solely on survival, with no thoughts of settling down or having a family. If he wins the competition, he plans to use the prize money to pay off his mother's mortgage. Right after landing, he spotted a caribou near his campsite. Unfortunately, caribou are a protected species, so he couldn't do anything about it. He then began digging into the ground to create insulation for the winter and built his shelter directly over the dugout space. Next, he gathered wood and started building. The shelter didn't need to be large, but it had to be strong enough to withstand grizzly bears and warm enough to survive the harsh winter. Once the structure was ready, he moved all of his supplies inside. But while he was sleeping soundly, a brown bear appeared right at his doorstep. Luckily, it eventually wandered off, but that entire night, Dub didn't dare close his eyes for even a second. As soon as the sun rose, he quickly relocated his shelter to a different spot to avoid another potential encounter with the bear. Michaela, 34 years old, spent her first day setting up a simple but secure shelter. Her location seemed relatively safe. There were no signs of bears in the area. As an adventure guide by profession, building traps, hunting, and fishing are just part of her daily routine. Even hunting wolves wouldn't be a problem for her. She joined the show to prove her abilities, and of course, winning the $500,000 prize would also mean a better life. After crafting 2 decoy ducks and placing them on the lake, she dropped her fishing net into the water to try catching fish. The purpose of the decoy ducks was to lure real ducks in close enough to potentially hunt them later. On her way back to camp, she came across wolf tracks along the riverbank. That was not a good sign. If a pack of wolves were to attack and she had no weapons on her, she could easily end up being their next meal. On the second day, Cubby found a few blueberries on the ground. Although there weren't many, they could still give him a small energy boost. After that, he began working on building a more permanent shelter. Since the area is home to many predators and large animals, creating a solid and secure shelter was his top priority. He used thick tree trunks as support pillars, constructed a roof overhead, and built a large bed underneath. That was enough for today. Time to rest. Only one day had passed, but Forest Ranger Isaiah was already feeling overwhelmed. He deeply missed his wife and child. The excitement he once had before joining the competition had completely faded. He hadn't expected to feel this way, but he knew he couldn't give up. Not when he had promised his daughter to stay strong and prove himself. Determined, he decided to go out and search for food. However, as soon as he ate a single blueberry, his nose started bleeding. This made Isaiah a bit frustrated. There might have been something wrong with the berry. Not wanting to waste another minute, he quickly changed tactics. He headed to the river to fish, a much safer and less energy-draining option than hunting in the forest. He tied a hook to his fishing line and set up a trap in the water, hoping to catch something soon. Meanwhile, Michaela was heading to the river to check her fishing net. But to her surprise, she found bear tracks right by the water's edge. Wolves in front, bears behind. This place was turning out to be incredibly dangerous. To make things worse, the current in the river was quite strong, and the net had gotten tangled. She hadn't caught a single fish. Still, Michaela didn't show a trace of anger or frustration. Calm and composed, she carefully untangled the net and reset it back into the water. On her way back, she came across a large stone. In her culture, such stones are considered sacred. Respecting her beliefs, she took the time to clear the grass around it and offered a sincere prayer. William woke up after a good night's sleep and got ready to find some breakfast. Wild roses were edible, but he knew not to eat too many. They could irritate the skin. After eating a few berries, he clearly started feeling better. His spirits lifted even more when he spotted rabbit tracks. If he set a few traps around here, he might actually catch one. Without wasting time, William crafted a simple snare and tied it to a sturdy stick. Ever since losing that big fish, he'd been feeling pretty down. His confidence had taken a hit. But if he could catch this rabbit, it might just turn things around. After setting the trap, he headed to a small swampy area to try his luck with fishing again. The shallow water was perfect for catching small fish. Spotting a good stick, he slammed it into the water, and just like that, he caught 2 small fish. Encouraged, he kept at it. By the end of his effort, he had a total of 5 fish, a well-deserved reward for all his hard work. It was the morning of day 4. Michaela was busy with her usual morning prayer, a quiet ritual she followed faithfully. But today, something was different. She could hear wolves howling, and they were close. Uncomfortably close. Still, she didn't let it shake her focus. Let them howl all they want. She had more important things to do. As always, her first task after waking was to check the fishing net. Unfortunately, it was another disappointment. No fish. It felt like her survival skills she was once so proud of, were somehow being neutralized in this harsh place. With nothing to bring back, she began the walk to camp. But fate had other plans. On the trail, she stumbled upon a kidney likely left behind by wolves after hunting a rabbit. It was a strange, unexpected gift from nature. She gathered some wood, started a fire, and roasted it. The taste? Not exactly delicious, but in the wild, food is food. Cubby was in the middle of building his long-term shelter when hunger struck hard. His stomach growled louder than the wind through the trees, and satisfying that hunger became his top priority. He grabbed his bow and arrows and headed into the forest. The dense underbrush made movement difficult, especially for someone of Cubby's large build. He pushed his way through branches and thorns for over half an hour without spotting a single animal. Then suddenly, he froze. Right in front of him was a massive paw print, undeniably from a giant grizzly bear. The track was fresh, clear, and far too close for comfort. But his hunger pushed him onward. He couldn't turn back now. Then, out of nowhere, Cubby let out a loud scream and collapsed to the ground. What happened? No one could have predicted it. One of his arrows had slipped out of its quiver and pierced his own thigh, right in the femoral artery. It was a nightmare scenario. The longer the arrow stayed in, the worse it would get. Gritting his teeth, Cubby cut open his pant leg, pulled out the arrow with shaking hands, and slapped on a makeshift bandage. But the damage was done. As he limped back toward his camp, the pain intensified. Blood loss made him dizzy. The wound was deep, too deep for one man to handle alone in the wild. With no other option, Cubby reached for his satellite phone and called for help. It was a heartbreaking end to his journey. Cubby became the first contestant to leave the competition this season. His name is Timber, 35 years old. This is his first day here, and he's incredibly excited to explore, well, except for the bears. He works as a rescue worker and has a deep love for nature. In fact, his family lives completely off the grid. Unlike the other contestants, Timber chose to go hunting in the forest right on day one. He crossed the woods and reached a riverbank, where he found tracks of both a grizzly bear and a moose. Based on his experience, Timber judged that these tracks were fairly old, meaning the animals weren't nearby. Grizzly bears prefer flat, obstacle-free paths, so they tend to stay near rivers or in sparse forests. If you want to avoid running into one, it's best to stay far away from those areas. That's why Timber decided to venture deeper into the thick forest. Though it was tough to hike through, it offered safety in return. Soon after, he spotted a squirrel in a tree. With a precise arrow shot, he secured his first meal. Not only that, squirrel meat also makes great bait for fishing. He headed to the river and set up multiple fish traps. While waiting, he quickly built a temporary shelter to save time. Once the shelter was complete, he rushed back to the river to check his traps and caught a big fish. With a full meal on day one, Timber is off to a strong start. Thanks to his deep knowledge of the wilderness, he could very well be a top contender for the championship title this season. In front of you is Sarah, 49 years old. Before marriage, she was a vegetarian and strongly opposed hunting. But after marrying her husband, she moved to Alaska. Her husband is passionate about the outdoors, and soon, she too fell deeply in love with that lifestyle. If she wins the $500,000 prize, the two of them won't have to hunt anymore. After finding a suitable campsite, she began setting up a simple tent. Next, she wanted to explore the nearby area to see if she could find any berries or pine mushrooms. Berries weren't too hard to find here, but they weren't nearly enough to survive on. If she wanted to win this competition, she needed to stockpile as much food as possible before winter came. A little while later, she discovered a lake, perfect for setting fish traps. To her surprise, there were also beavers living there. If she could catch one, she'd have both protein and fat. Unfortunately, she hadn't brought her bow with her, so all she could do was watch the beavers happily swimming on the surface. This is Dusty, 35 years old. He planned to build his shelter deep in the forest, as it would help block out the cold wind. Dusty is a welder by trade, but in his free time, he loves being outdoors, hunting, fishing, and practicing wilderness survival. This is his first time this close to the Arctic Circle. If he can win the competition, he wants to use the money to improve his family's life. To survive long-term, he knows he needs a proper, sturdy shelter. He started cutting nearby branches and began designing his cabin. Each log was carefully and neatly placed. After more than 2 hours of hard work, the structure was complete. Now, all he needed to do was cover it with an insulating thermal blanket, and it would be perfect. It's day 2 for Peter, 43 years old. He woke up from a good night's sleep, feeling a bit disoriented as this is his first time joining the competition. He hadn't found a water source yet, so he was extremely thirsty. He tried to start a fire to boil water, but due to the humid climate, no matter how many times he tried, the flame just wouldn't catch. That meant Peter had to head out and look for dry tinder to help ignite the fire. Peter is an avid reader and enjoys outdoor sports. He's a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and most of his wilderness knowledge was learned through books and then practiced step by step in real life. After some searching, he discovered a small pond near his camp, perfect for fishing and collecting water. On his way back, Peter spotted a pile of bear droppings. Though it wasn't fresh, it was a clear sign that the area wasn't completely safe. Without a fire to protect himself, humans stand little chance against such predators. Fortunately, after finding enough tinder, Peter was finally able to start a fire and boil water for drinking. On day 2, Dusty started looking for food, but only managed to find a few wild rose hips. They didn't offer much starch, but it was still better than going hungry. Around his camp, he constantly heard the sounds of squirrels in the forest, so he rushed back to grab some wire and set up a snare trap. Just as he headed out to gather firewood, 3 squirrels broke into his camp. Dusty quickly grabbed his bow and, with his expert archery skills, took down one of them with a precise shot. After cleaning and removing the organs, he cooked a hearty stew with the squirrel meat and some wild vegetables, finally enjoying a well-rounded and nutritious meal. Sarah was building herself a conical tent, an ancient structure used by nomads for thousands of years, known for its durability and effectiveness. Once the shelter was complete, it was time to hunt for one of those beavers to roast over charcoal, if she could catch one. After waiting patiently by the lake, her target finally appeared. As the beaver swam toward her, Sarah released an arrow and hit it, but the animal quickly dove underwater. After a tough moment of inner conflict, she slowly stepped into the cold water to retrieve her arrow. Unfortunately, the beaver had escaped. It's now day 3. The man in front of you is Jake, 42 years old, a professional falconer. Jake's father taught him everything he needed to know about the wilderness, so he's skilled in hunting and fishing techniques. However, luck hasn't been on his side. He lost both his fishing hook and line shortly after arriving. He's been searching for days with no success. Now, he has no choice but to weave a net from core to trap fish. After completing the net, he headed to the lakeshore, placed it in the water, and returned to camp to wait. Today, Peter began building his shelter. What do you think about removing the bark before constructing a camp? Let me know in the comments. After more than 3 hours of non-stop work, the frame of his shelter was complete. The structure looked like a giant steamed bun. He then crafted a simple wooden bed, layering some leaves to use as a pillow. Now he just needs to cover it with a thermal tarp, and it's done. Jake spent an entire hour trying to make fire. He's the only contestant without a fire starter. But thanks to his skills, he was able to spark a flame. Here's how he preserves his charcoal. He crushes it and stores it in a birch bark container, sealing it tightly. His belt is made of metal, and by creating friction, it can generate sparks. When those sparks land on the preserved charcoal, it ignites. That's how Jake makes fire and stores his fuel. Afterward, he headed to the river to check his net, but unfortunately, there weren't any fish. Suddenly, he heard the sound of a beaver. Jake broke off a tree branch and placed it near the water to lure the beaver in, then quietly hid nearby to wait. Let's see what happens next. Timber came up with a bold idea. His waterproof quiver could double as a temporary water container. This would allow him to travel farther in search of food without worrying about dehydration. But first, he needed to make a new quiver to carry his arrows. He took a piece of leather from his gear and skillfully crafted a simple yet highly effective quiver, lightweight, durable, and capable of holding multiple arrows. Soon after, Timber headed toward the riverbank, where he spotted tracks from various animals scattered all around. What really got him excited were the fresh moose tracks, his favorite prey. If he could take down a large moose, it would lay a solid foundation for winning the competition. He quietly ventured into the forest and came upon a large swamp, a place moose are known to frequent. There, Timber began imitating the call of a moose. To his surprise, it actually worked. A mature bull moose appeared, slowly making its way toward him. Timber moved gently, continuing to call out to lure the moose in. As it drew closer, the moose finally entered his shooting range. But overwhelmed by adrenaline, his hands started trembling, and the first arrow missed. The moose flinched but didn't run. Timber tried to step a little closer for a better shot. Unfortunately, by now, the moose had become suspicious. It turned and bolted into the forest. Missing such a golden opportunity was disappointing, but Timber remained composed. He knew he needed to take a deep breath and stay calm for the next attempt, because victory doesn't come to those who rush. Isaiah is still lying in his shelter with no plans to go outside just yet. The weather is still quite cold, so he decides to wait until the sun comes out before starting his task for the day. By midday, he finally gets out of bed. Today's mission: build a sturdy shelter, something that can both keep him warm and protect him from wild animals. First, he begins by gathering as much wood as possible to use for the frame and walls. Next, he needs to dig a pit to create solid walls, mimicking the structure of a real house. After spending the entire morning digging only a small section, exhaustion starts to kick in. Isaiah decides to take a short break before continuing with his work. Dub had woven himself a small thorn net. It may look tiny and humble, but hey, better than nothing. Once placed in the water, it could catch fish passively. Since the night he was visited by a bear while sleeping, he moved his camp to a safer location. Now that everything is set, he can focus on searching for food to continue the challenge. Every day, he spends a lot of time fishing. He throws the bait again and again, waiting patiently, but nothing bites. Suddenly, a duck flies by. He quickly grabs his bow and tries to mimic duck sounds to lure it in. Unfortunately, his imitation sounds more like a chicken, and the duck flies off in the opposite direction. Unbelievable! Moments later, he hears the duck again. He hides in a nearby bush, waiting silently for the duck to swim closer. But the perfect opportunity slips away. The duck seems to catch a strange smell. Well, he hasn't showered in 4 days, and it shows. The ducks take off once more. His arrow? It lands deep underwater. Thinking what you're probably thinking, Dub jumps into the river, not just to retrieve the arrow, but to take a much-needed bath. Hopefully now, the ducks won't be driven away by his sour scent anymore. Day 5 has arrived, and Dub is back. This time, he's completed a new, sturdier shelter, and even built himself a tool bench. Just as he was admiring his work, he hears a squirrel's call. Looks like breakfast has come knocking at his door, so why not take the opportunity? He grabs his bow and dashes after the squirrel. The first arrow whooshes past, but misses. With the second shot, Dub nails it. Bullseye. The squirrel is down. Now the real question is, will he cook with it? Roast it over the fire? Or make a savory stew with mushrooms? What do you think? Let us know in the comments below. Michaela camouflaged herself with wild grass, trying to stay hidden while continuing to lure in the duck. But in reality, this strategy wasn't working. Her fishing net still hasn't found a good spot to be placed. As a nomad, Michaela is used to migrating based on food availability. Even though life in a modern world is tough, she believes she can overcome it. She heads into the forest to forage for berries. Not only does she find some, but she also discovers a burdock root, a plant valued for both its nutritional and medicinal properties. She picks a few more berries, and with that, she has enough for a full breakfast. Since the start of the competition, Peter still hasn't had a proper meal. Today, he's crafting a fish hook, getting ready for a fishing trip. Once everything is set, he heads to the riverbank and begins fishing. Surprisingly, it doesn't take long before a fish bites the hook. This unexpected success gives Peter a big boost in confidence. He quickly reels it in, and just look at it. That fish is huge, enough to last him an entire week. Still, Peter decides to stay a little longer. Who knows? Maybe he can catch another one. Good morning, Dub. Just like every other day, The first thing he does after waking up is check his fishing net. It's been days since he last caught anything. As he steps toward the riverbank, he spots a bird perched on the net. Could this be a sign of good luck? Maybe there's something in the net today. And as if by some miracle, that tiny net has actually caught him a big fish. Dub is over the moon. After cleaning the fish, he slices off a piece and drops it straight into the pot. This meal could provide up to 3,000 calories, exactly what he needs. After 6 exhausting, hungry days, Dub finally gets the meal he deserves. Congrats, Dub. Isaiah is still diligently working on building his shelter. After finishing the pit, he sets up 4 wooden posts at each corner and secures them tightly. No matter how exhausted he feels, he's determined to complete it, not just for the championship, but for his family. When hunger sets in, he takes a short break and heads out to hunt. Surprisingly, with just one shot, he manages to take down a squirrel. He brings it to the riverbank to clean it, setting aside the inedible parts to use as bait. Eating squirrel meat while fishing? That's what we call multitasking. After finishing the entire squirrel, he goes back to check his fishing hook. And guess what? This time he lands a huge fish. At this rate, it's going to be hard for Isaiah to stay hungry, even if he tries. Meanwhile, Peter is busy making a fishing net, knowing that the quickest way to get food is by catching fish. After finishing the net, he brings it to the river to set it up. To his surprise, by noon he had already caught a massive fish. Rumor has it, the meat of this fish is incredibly delicious, sweet like king crab. Then he checks his fishing traps and catches yet another big fish. Just a single morning, and he's already scored a feast. But there's no way he can finish all of it in one day. To preserve the fish, he decides to smoke it. He builds a cone-shaped frame using branches, clamps the fish meat inside, then covers everything with moss to seal it. However, with an abundant food supply also comes danger, especially from bears. They can sniff out his shelter from miles away. Let's hope Peter won't have to face a bear anytime soon. Lately, things have been going pretty well for William. At the very least, he's been able to catch some fish. Today, he heads out to check his traps to see if there's anything he can catch. After several days of waiting, he's finally caught something. The meat from this animal is enough to keep William full for 2 hearty meals. Do you think William should cook it over the fire, or try making jerky for later? Michaela hasn't been as lucky. She's been surviving mainly on wild berries. This morning's breakfast includes some berries and a wild radish, a meal that's hard to describe in terms of taste. After that, she heads to the riverbank to check her fishing net. And finally, after countless efforts, she's caught an enormous fish. Excited, she quickly cleans it and brings it back to camp to enjoy her very first meat-based meal. Since storing up a large amount of food, Peter decided today to build a ladder to hide his supplies up high. It wasn't a difficult task for him, but it did take a lot of energy. With just a moment's distraction, he accidentally injured his hand, but that didn't stop him for long. After bandaging the wound, he quickly got back to work and soon completed the ladder. Later, he went to the river to check his fish traps, but today there was nothing. No fish at all. That hit him hard. Despite having a solid food reserve, Peter suddenly felt like a failure. In a blink, his spirit plummeted. In a moment of weakness, he called the production team and said he wanted to quit the challenge. Honestly, I couldn't understand it. He clearly had what it takes to stay much longer. What do you think about this? Let me know in the comments. The challenge has entered day 8. Dusty is one of the 8 contestants still holding on at this stage. But before heading out to fish, he decides it's time to clean his head. After all, it's been 8 days without a proper wash. He kneels by the cold river, soaking his tangled hair. Using some crushed wild leaves as natural shampoo, he scrubs quickly and rinses off with the crisp water. Just like that, he feels refreshed, ready for another battle with nature. But there's no time to waste. Dub rushes back to his fishing spot, where a line has been set. Suddenly, the rod twitches. His heart races. With steady hands, he pulls the line, and there it is, a fish flailing just beneath the surface. One swift strike, and the hunt is over. After cleaning and cooking the fish, he finally sits down to enjoy the well-earned reward of his hard work, a rare moment of satisfaction in this unforgiving wilderness. Lately, William has been fully occupied building his shelter. Though the structure isn't large, it provides him with a much-needed sense of comfort and safety. With winter rains approaching, he knows that survival depends on preparation. So, he heads to the river to gather mud and stones, essential materials for constructing a chimney. Out here, no one survives the cold nights without a fire. William is the only contestant who didn't bring a bow and arrow, which makes hunting significantly harder. But he has his own strategy. After finishing a self-made weapon, he begins his hunt. Moving slowly through the underbrush, he spots a group of grouse in the distance. Locking in on one, he inches closer, calm, silent, focused. Then snap! A precise loop of his snare traps the bird. Success! William can't believe how effective this method is. If things keep going like this, hunger might no longer be his biggest threat. He stores the bird in his food cache and continues hunting. Just like before, he creeps toward another unsuspecting grouse, and once again, success. With each catch, William proves that you don't always need fancy tools, just patience, precision, and a clever mind. It's a survival skill the other contestants might want to learn from. A new day has arrived. Sarah hasn't had much luck hunting lately. She's been surviving on a handful of berries just to keep her stomach from growling. While reinforcing her shelter with fallen leaves, something unexpected happens. A majestic owl swoops down and perches nearby. In her tribe's tradition, owls are seen as a symbol of good luck and even as spirit guides that help hunters find their prey. Taking it as a hopeful sign, Sarah sets off to gather some energy-boosting plants, mainly wild roots she knows are edible. Once she feels a bit stronger, she ventures deeper into the forest, bow in hand and hope in her heart. Suddenly, a sharp call from a grouse breaks the stillness. Her instincts kick in. Carefully, she approaches. One smooth movement, one perfectly aimed arrow, and the bird goes down. She carries her prize to the riverbank to clean and prepare it, then heads back to camp. Tonight, for the first time in days, Sarah enjoys the most satisfying and hearty meal she's had since the beginning of this survival challenge. After more than 5 hours of hard work, he finally succeeded in building a cone-shaped smokehouse. Even though his food supply wasn't abundant at the moment, Dusty believed that preparing ahead was always the smarter choice. Having been out in the wilderness for so many days, a deep sense of homesickness began to creep in. To cope with the loneliness, he looked for more tasks to keep his mind occupied. And what better option than to go hunting? Wildlife was plentiful around the area, and Dusty soon managed to catch his first grouse. While processing the bird, he carefully saved some wing feathers to craft his own arrows. But lately, Dusty had been experiencing persistent stomach pain. He hoped it would pass soon. While waiting for the grouse to finish cooking, a worrying thought struck him. He had been drinking from a pond near the headwaters. If there were beavers living in that water, he might have been exposed to parasites that can cause stomach issues. The pain lingered, joined by bouts of dizziness. Last night, he had to grit his teeth and endure the worst of it. It scared him. If this continued, he knew it would force him out of the competition. The next morning, he tried eating a little to see if things improved, but the pain remained. He went for a walk, hoping movement might help, but neither food nor fresh air brought relief. There was no other option. Dusty made the hard but wise decision to tap out of the competition. His health simply wasn't something to gamble with, not even for $500,000. I believe he made the right call. Do you agree with me? Goodbye, Dusty. We wish you strength, healing, and good health ahead. Sarah's spirits had lifted significantly ever since she successfully hunted that grouse. The victory sparked a renewed determination in her. She was more focused than ever on making it to the end. Today, she had a new plan. Use the grouse's entrails as bait to catch some big fish. But first, she needed to carefully craft a few sturdy fishing hooks. Without proper hooks, the fish could easily bite through and escape. Meticulously, she worked with sharp tools and steady hands, knowing that every detail mattered. With her gear ready and her bait prepared, she set off toward the river. But then, a gut-wrenching surprise. The pile of entrails she had hidden so carefully was gone. Vanished. Stolen by some wild animal, no doubt. Frustration and anger surged through her. All that preparation, gone in an instant. Still, she refused to sit still and sulk. She grabbed her gear and headed into the forest, determined to find something, anything to eat. Hunting wasn't easy, especially without bait, but fate gave her a break. She stumbled upon a patch of bovine mushrooms, a rare and hardy wild fungus. Sarah gathered as many as she could, carefully selecting the freshest ones to store for the days ahead. No meat today, but with a full pouch of wild mushrooms, she knew this was still a win. Out here, survival means adapting, and Sarah just proved once again she's a fighter. Life had been quite pleasant for William lately. With a steady supply of food after days of hard hunting, he finally had some time to relax and unwind. Early in the morning, William sat outside his shelter, bathing in the gentle rays of the rising sun. The cool breeze and warm sunlight made him feel almost like he was home. But soon, the growling of his stomach awakened his survival instincts. He stood up and walked over to the spot where he had hidden the grouse he caught yesterday, hoping to enjoy a hearty breakfast. But then, as soon as he arrived, he froze. The bird was gone. All that remained was a scattered pile of feathers on the ground. His heart sank. A heavy silence settled over him. Clearly, this wasn't the work of a human. The signs pointed to a weasel, a sneaky predator with a sharp nose and a knack for striking when you're off guard. William sighed. Well, looks like this spot isn't safe for storing food anymore. Since the beginning of the competition, Jake still hasn't managed to catch a single fish, while the other contestants have reeled in who knows how many. Today is no different. He checks the fishing net, but it's just as empty as always. With a sigh, he throws it back into the water and returns to camp to wait. Suddenly, memories of his late father come flooding back. Tears begin to roll down his cheeks, uninvited but unstoppable. And in a moment of distraction, misfortune strikes. Without heat-resistant gloves, Jake tries to lift a pot of boiling water using a handful of grass. His grip slips, he gets burned. Then in a second attempt, he burns himself again. What a streak of bad luck. But it's okay. Jake knows how to handle this. He calmly opens the first aid kit, cleans the wound, disinfects it, then wraps it carefully with a bandage. All the bad luck gone. Now it's just Jake and a new day waiting to turn things around. Timber continues to pursue his passion for hunting moose, because he knows very well that taking down just one could mean winning the entire competition. To make that happen, he's always stationed at the edge of the meadow, carefully observing. He doesn't want to miss a single opportunity. But now, hunger starts to creep in, so he decides to take a break and find some other food. He focuses on crafting a fishing net, one that can catch fish automatically while he's still out tracking moose. After fiddling with it all morning, he only manages to complete about 3 sections. Not wanting to go hungry, he heads to the river to check his fishing traps, hoping to score dinner. To his surprise, there's already a huge fish caught in one of them. After checking the rest of the lines, he finds a second catch. All of this in just 1 hour. Looks like Timber is in for a feast tonight. Thanks to the help of the 2 fish he caught, Timber has been able to focus on building his camp over the past few days. His A-frame style shelter, constructed from thick, sturdy logs, is strong enough to withstand the cold and keep wild animals out. Once the main frame was up, he packed moss in the gaps to block the wind from creeping in. This might just be the most luxurious shelter in the entire competition. Jake is still nursing his burn, and every day he has to change the bandages, a necessary routine to prevent infection from setting in. After carefully tending to the wound, he heads down to the riverbank to check the fishing net. But the scene before him leaves him wide-eyed in disbelief. Not only did he catch a fish, he caught 2 at once. With this catch, he can eat well for the next few days. To make the most of it, Jake sets up a simple smokehouse he built earlier, placing part of the fish inside to smoke and preserve it, while the rest he's going to cook and enjoy right now. After completing his A-frame shelter, Timber could finally sit back and enjoy his smoked fish fully and peacefully. But just then, he heard it, a faint sound echoing from the distance. Could it be a moose? Without wasting a second, Timber grabbed his bow, but as he turned, a sudden rush of wings swooped past him. An owl, so close it nearly collided with him, throwing him off guard. Startled, he swung a stick to drive it away and refocused immediately. Now on high alert, he headed toward the sound. The path was long, and to avoid alerting the animal, he chose to loop around by the riverbank. If this hunt succeeded, the championship could already be within his grasp. He arrived at a clearing. No shelter, no cover. So, Timber did what few could pull off. He mimicked the call of a moose. And then, he waited. Moments later, a flicker of movement through the trees. Timber aimed his arrow straight at the moose's chest. With a sharp whoosh, the arrow hit its mark. A faint crackling sound followed. The arrow had pierced the moose's lungs. Sure enough, the massive animal didn't get far. It let out a deep, guttural cry and collapsed. Timber's heart swelled with joy. With this much meat, he wouldn't have to worry about food for a long time. But as he approached the moose, he was shocked. Seeing the sheer size of the animal up close, it was massive. There was no time to waste. He needed to process the moose quickly before wolves caught the scent. Given its enormous size, it would take him an entire day and night to haul all the meat back to camp. First, he had to remove the inedible parts, like the stomach and intestines. To keep predators away, he lit a fire nearby. The flames served as both a warning signal and a heat source for cooking some meat to refuel his energy. Then, Timber began the butchering process. One large cut at a time, clean and efficient. As dusk approached, Timber decided to return to camp, carrying the meat he had already processed. The rest would have to wait until morning. Night fell quickly. The temperature dropped to around 6 degrees Celsius, perfect for preserving the fresh meat. Now, all he could do was hope for morning to come quickly, so he could bring the rest of the prize back home. A long night had passed. After carefully processing every last bit of the moose, Timber made sure not a single piece of meat was wasted. The parts that weren't edible, like the intestines and ribs, he generously shared with the lucky crows that had gathered nearby. Now came the real challenge: how to preserve all this meat. Without hesitation, Timber got to work building a temporary storage shed, a meat vault of sorts, before he could begin the smoking process. 3 to 4 hours passed, and the structure gradually took shape. At the bottom, he laid down a thick layer of leaves. Then came the meat, neatly arranged. Another layer of leaves, another layer of meat, stacked carefully, one after the other. This method would help preserve the meat for a longer period. Finally, he sealed the top tightly. A solid, meat-storing fortress, complete and ready. The cold climate here made Michaela's feet constantly damp. To fix that, she rubbed a bit of charcoal powder on her feet to keep them dry. A clever little trick from the wild. With that done, she headed into the forest to set up traps. Animals often follow the same trails, so she cleared a narrow path just for them. Then, she carefully placed snare traps right along that trail, designed mostly to catch snowshoe hares and squirrels. Each trap had to be set with precision to increase the chance of success. While focused on her work, she suddenly heard a fluttering sound nearby. Looking around, there was a grouse. She quickly drew her bow, notched an arrow, and let it fly. Missed, but surprisingly, the bird didn't fly away. It just stood there, staring. She smirked, took a breath, knocked her second arrow. Thwack! The bird bolted. Not a successful hunt this time, but definitely a hilarious moment. I couldn't help but laugh. What about you? Jake was lying down, soaking in the peace of the wild. Although, let's be honest, luck hadn't exactly been on his side lately. He hadn't caught a single fish in days. Still, it was time to check the fishing net. Dragging himself to the riverside, tired and not expecting much, he slowly lifted the net. And then, surprise, 2 fish, caught in the net, wriggling around. Just like that, all the fatigue melted away. But wait, there's more. One of the fish had another fish in its mouth. That means not just 2, but 3 fish in one go. Talk about a lucky break. Dub is building a mud and stone fireplace to keep warm. At the same time, he's reinforcing his shelter, sealing every little gap to make sure no cold wind sneaks in. Why? Because winter is coming fast. But that's not all. He also layers branches and dry grass over the top of his shelter, and finally adds an extra layer of insulation. With all that in place, he's built a true winter fortress. So even if the snow starts falling tomorrow, Dub is ready and confident to take on the cold head-on, while the other contestants are already warm and cozy in their shelters. Isaiah is still hard at work. He chops wood, gathers stones, doing everything he can to build a safe place of his own. With winter closing in, he hopes all this effort will pay off in time. But after a long, exhausting day, his shelter is still only halfway done. That night, with nowhere proper to sleep, he curls up inside a makeshift hut. But rest doesn't come easy. Wolves howl in the distance, their eerie cries echoing through the night. Isaiah lies awake, tense and afraid, hoping the sun will rise soon, so he can make it through this terrifying night. The next morning, Isaiah got right back to work, determined to finish what he started. Though the shelter was still just a frame, it already looked big and sturdy, strong enough to hold up against the cold. As for warmth, with the way he built it, there was no doubt this place would keep him safe and cozy. Now, with the basics in place, his shelter was finally coming together. This morning, while out hunting, Michaela stumbled upon a bird's nest. There were no eggs inside, but it was still useful, perfect for starting a fire. Her main mission today was clear: build a warm, sturdy shelter to survive the brutal winter ahead. She gathered as much wood and branches as she could, focused and determined to reinforce her camp. But then, a loud animal cry broke the silence. She quickly followed the sound, only to find a rabbit already lifeless lying on the ground. Talk about a lucky day. She brought it back to camp, carefully removed the inedible parts, and kept only the tender meat. Soon, the rabbit was simmering in a pot, filling the air with an aroma that words can't quite describe. Ever since finishing his shelter, Dub had been spending most of his time fishing. Out of every 24 hours, he dedicated 12 to fishing and the other 12 to sleeping. That was his rhythm, day in, day out. But today, luck just wasn't on his side. Cast after cast, bait after bait. Not a single fish took the hook. Just as despair started to settle in, a small fish suddenly appeared, following the hook right to his feet. He waited, holding his breath, and the moment it bit, he yanked the line with all his might. But the hook snapped free. The fish slipped away, vanishing into the water. Maybe this spot just isn't lucky anymore, Dub thought. Time to pack up and try somewhere new. While checking on his meat stash, Timber froze in shock. His entire storage pile had been dug up and scattered. He quickly followed the trail, and the paw prints gave it away. A wolverine had found his supply. He had to act fast. If he didn't come up with a way to deter it now, he could lose everything. Timber rushed back to camp. He cut the remaining meat into smaller pieces and hung them all inside his shelter, preparing to smoke everything immediately. This wasn't his first run-in with wildlife. Just recently, 2 or 3 bears had wandered dangerously close to his camp. This method was now a necessity, not a choice. Once everything was hung, he lit a fire beneath the meat, starting the slow process of smoking it all. To replenish his energy, Timber cooked himself a hearty meat stew, warming both his body and his spirits. Look at this. What on earth is going on? Dub's entire shelter is filled with smoke. Turns out, the smoke vent on his cabin was way too small. But today, he didn't have time to fix it. Why? Because he was starving. Since the competition began, Dub had visibly lost weight, and now he could barely function from exhaustion. To conserve energy, he came up with a clever plan: build a few automatic fishing traps. The idea was simple. When a fish bites the bait, the trap triggers a mechanism that pulls up the line. No waiting required. As he was setting things up, Dub casually tossed another line into the water. And bam! He caught a fish. Not huge, but enough to quiet his hunger for now. While cleaning the fish, suddenly, snap! One of his automatic rods triggered. This was perfect. He now had food for tomorrow. Today, Michaela set out to build a few traps to catch squirrels. She found a piece of wood, just the right thickness, and began cleaning its surface, prepping it for the snare. But only a short while later, something in her crumbled. Her body was still fine. Her shelter? Still standing strong. But emotionally, she was falling apart. The weight of solitude, the deafening silence of the wilderness, finally caught up with her. And in that moment, it all became too much. Tears streamed down her face. Not from fear, not from pain, but from the aching loneliness. Still, Michaela didn't give up. She took a deep breath, hugged her arms close, and whispered to herself, "You've made it this far. You could go further." Sometimes the toughest battles out here aren't against nature. They're against the storm inside. On day 18, Michaela once again walked to the river to check her fish net. She was lucky this time. Inside was a large mackerel. But then, something no one expected happened. She turned around and gently released the fish back into the river. It seemed her spirit had been completely defeated. The exhaustion, the loneliness, the emotional weight. It had all become too much. Shortly after, she called the production team and officially announced her withdrawal from the competition. Ever since he hunted down the massive moose weighing nearly 1,000 pounds, Timber has been working nonstop to process the enormous amount of meat. He's constantly on edge, worried that bears or wolves might come and steal his hard-earned prize, or worse, that the meat might spoil. In the end, he decided the best way to preserve it was by smoking all of it. As the weather grows colder by the day, Timber finds himself with an endless list of tasks and barely any time to rest. Today's mission? Build a proper bed. Staying off the ground during the winter is crucial, as the earth will soon become unbearably cold. After measuring the right dimensions, he headed out to cut down trees to build the bed frame. It's no easy feat. Every step must be done with care to avoid injury. Just an hour into the work, the sheer weight of the massive logs began to take its toll. Exhausted, Timber had no choice but to take a short break before continuing his laborious task. Dub is feeling quite comfortable with his current situation. He's begun gathering and stockpiling dry firewood, and of course, checking his fish traps every day. The river in front of his shelter is nearly frozen over, and he knows time is running out. From now until it fully ices up, he needs to catch and store as much fish as possible. Only with enough food and firewood can he hope to survive the brutal winter ahead. Unfortunately, luck isn't on his side today. The fish trap came up empty. With no other option, Dub sets everything else aside and heads to the riverbank to focus entirely on fishing. Time passes. The cold creeps in. But just when things feel hopeless, the line on his auto fishing rod starts to twitch. His heart races with anxiety and anticipation. Unable to wait any longer, he grabs the line himself and begins to pull. He can feel it. The fish is huge. It yanks so hard, Dub nearly tumbles into the icy water. Steady hands, slow movements. He carefully draws the fish in, inch by inch. And then, there it is. Massive. A real prize catch. Grinning, he holds it up to the camera to show off his success, when suddenly, a small slip. The fish wriggles free and flops back into the river. Dub freezes stunned. He stands in silence, staring in disbelief as the water ripples away. It's a crushing blow, but after a deep breath, he shakes off the shock and steadies himself. There's no time for regret out here. He just has to stay calm and wait for the next chance. The other day, Jake managed to catch 3 fish in a single net, a solid win. In his spare time, he even sculpted a clay pipe, more for entertainment than anything practical. But today, he's got a serious task, building a long-term shelter that can stand up to the harsh winter ahead. He decides on a cone-shaped tent design, aiming to make it as tall as possible for better airflow and space. Once the frame is up, he carefully layers thick spruce branches over it, followed by a waterproof tarp for extra insulation. It's a massive undertaking, one that can't be finished in a single day. Still, he can't ignore the need for food. Jake sets aside some time to check his traps and go fishing. Since the beginning of the competition, he's caught fish 6 times, 4 of which came from his trusty net. Today, though, he's back at the river with a homemade fishing line. He lost his original gear early in the show, so he's relying entirely on this improvised setup. He finds a promising spot and casts his line into the water. Shockingly, the bait barely touches the surface before a massive fish bites. Jake braces himself and starts to reel it in, but then disaster. The line snaps, and his entire fishing rig sinks into the river. Devastated, Jake wades into the freezing water to retrieve the handmade gear. With his body now soaked, he knows he needs to get back to camp quickly to warm up and dry off before hypothermia sets in. It's clear now, Jake needs to refocus on completing his shelter and come up with a more reliable strategy for catching fish. Out here, even small setbacks can become serious threats to survival. It's now day 20, and recently, William has been catching a lot of fish. Some are for immediate meals, while the rest are being smoked for long-term preservation. This morning, he prepared a special dish, birch bark soup. Despite sounding strange, this soup is rich in starch, natural sugars, and vitamins, helping to supplement the nutrients missing from a fish-only diet and increasing the feeling of fullness. Today, William headed into the forest to check on his smokehouse. While at it, he planned to forage for wild berries and possibly do some hunting. Suddenly, he heard a growling noise echoing from a distance. Upon closer inspection, he realized it was a long-tailed weasel, a protected species under local law, so he had no choice but to leave it alone. But when he reached the smokehouse, he froze. The fish he had carefully smoked and preserved were gone, clearly eaten, and the culprit was likely the weasel from earlier. To avoid going hungry, William quickly made his way back to the river to fish again. From a distance, he spotted a large fish caught in his net, and his mood immediately lifted. After gutting and splitting the fish, he packed it securely into a bag. This time, William took no chances. He tied the bag tightly and hung it high in a tree, far away from the forest edge, determined to not let his hard-earned food get stolen again. Today, the show's medical team is arriving to conduct health checks on each remaining contestant. If anyone is found to be medically unfit, they'll be forced to leave and return home for treatment. Jake is extremely anxious. He's been struggling with both physical injuries and emotional exhaustion. Isaiah, on the other hand, has been experiencing occasional chest pain. He suspects it might be heart-related, but the doctor later clarifies it's actually due to hunger. Timber had previously suffered a bout of stomach pain, but he managed to recover on his own. One by one, the contestants undergo their checkups. Most are cleared to continue, all except one. It's Jake. The doctor diagnoses him with a bowel obstruction, a condition where stool becomes lodged in the rectum, preventing normal digestion. It's a serious issue that requires immediate medical attention. If untreated, it could become life-threatening. Though disappointed and reluctant to leave, Jake ultimately accepts the reality of the situation. With a heavy heart, he says goodbye to the competition and prepares to head home for treatment. Lately, Sarah has been diligently going out to fish every day, but she always comes back empty-handed. One day, a pesky gray jay lands on a roof of her shelter and starts stealing her fishing bait. Frustrated, she yells to chase it away. If that bird weren't a protected species, it might have ended up as dinner. Today is no different. Sarah heads back to the riverbank to check her fishing traps. But before she gets there, the sudden flapping of wings catches her attention. A spruce grouse appears, seemingly offering itself up. There's no reason not to take the shot. She raises her bow and aims, but the arrow strikes a branch instead. Moments later, another opportunity arises. This time, she misses completely. With no luck in hunting, she turns to the fishing traps once more, hoping for a miracle. But again, they come up empty. Disheartened and exhausted, she drags her feet back to camp. Overwhelmed with emotion, she begins to cry, missing her mother and her family deeply. The loneliness is suffocating. If the situation doesn't improve soon, it could mean the end of her journey. But after a while, Sarah collects herself, wipes away the tears, and regains her composure. She's not ready to give up just yet. With quiet determination, she presses on. Isaiah was gradually putting the finishing touches on his shelter. Even though his body was tired, he refused to let it slow him down. As of today, his shelter was finally complete, solid, weather-resistant, and a place he could truly call home. For the first time in a long while, he was able to relax and enjoy a deep, restful sleep. Waking up refreshed, Asaya headed down to the riverbank to see if he could find anything useful. That's when he stumbled upon some dry birch bark, a fantastic find. Not only does it catch fire easily, but it's also water-resistant, making it the perfect fire-starting material in the cold wilderness. Feeling motivated, he then ventured into the forest to begin hunting. To his surprise, he stumbled upon a fully intact fishing net, something he hadn't had time or resources to make himself. It felt like a gift from the wilderness itself. With a net like this, Asaya realized he wouldn't need to spend hours fishing anymore. Now the fish would come to him. Things were finally starting to look up. Sarah's hair had started falling out more noticeably, a worrying sign of her body being pushed to its limits. But that didn't stop her from heading out to search for food. Today turned out to be a success. On just one trip, Sarah managed to hunt 2 grouse. Afterward, she made her way to the riverbank to clean and prepare the birds, already thinking about what kind of meal she could cook up for dinner tonight. It's been 23 days since the competition began, and Isaiah is feeling excited just thinking about the fish that might get caught in his net. But first, he has to quickly untangle the mess of netting that looks like a twisted ball of yarn. According to the show's rules, the fishing net can't be longer than 12 feet or taller than 10 squares, so he needs to trim it down a bit. Then, he chops down a spruce tree to use as a support post. After working for a while, Isaiah suddenly feels his heart begin to tighten. He has no choice but to stop and rest. While Isaiah was carefully repairing his fishing net, a sudden sharp pain struck his chest. He tried to control his breathing, suppress the pain, and continue working. He knew all too well. If he gave up this competition, he would also be giving up the chance to win the $500,000 prize, money that he and his wife desperately needed for another round of in vitro fertilization. With their current income, it was nearly impossible. However, caught between the dream of becoming a father again and his deteriorating health, Isaiah couldn't decide right away. He sat down, silently thinking things through. After a long moment of reflection, Isaiah picked up the phone and called the production team. In a calm but resolute voice, he officially announced his withdrawal from the competition. Although it wasn't an easy decision, he chose to prioritize his health. He still has a wife waiting for him at home, and he couldn't afford to take such a big risk. Farewell to Isaiah, a strong, emotional, and responsible fighter. We wish you a swift recovery and many happy moments with your family, especially with a little angel joining you in the near future. Let's set aside that emotional farewell and get back to the competition. Timber's shelter, as it turns out, is right in the heart of moose territory. Today, he spotted several majestic moose drinking at a nearby swamp. But with his food supplies now abundant, Timber didn't need to hunt them. He simply watched, appreciating the rare moment of peace. Thanks to his sturdy wooden bed, Timber enjoyed the best night's sleep he's had so far. But while he was focused on sawing wood earlier, an unfortunate slip caused him to injure his fingernail. He had to act quickly. Any delay could lead to infection in such a wild environment. Using his survival knowledge, Timber applied resin from a spruce tree to the wound. This natural substance helps seal the injury and offers excellent anti-inflammatory properties. From now on, he knows he'll need to be more careful. Out here, even a small injury can become a serious problem, and there's no room for careless mistakes. At the same time, William was deep in the forest searching for berries. In just a few days, once the snow begins to fall, the bushes will stop bearing fruit. So this could be his last chance. While foraging, he stumbled upon a plastic bottle lying on the ground. He picked it up and brought it back to camp. It might come in handy later. Next, he made his way to the riverbank to check his fishing net. Unfortunately, there were no fish caught today. Luckily, he still had a small reserve of smoked fish back at camp, so it wasn't too concerning yet. On his way back, he took a moment to set up a few rabbit traps, hoping to diversify his food sources. For lunch, he planned to make a simple fish soup with the last of his remaining catch. If he doesn't trap anything tomorrow, he'll be down to just wild berries for sustenance. A light drizzle began to fall, cooling down the heat that had been pressing on the competition for the past few days. But the rain didn't stop Dub from heading out to check his fish trap and net that he had set earlier. The fishing line trap was disappointingly empty. Not a single fish had taken the bait. This let him down a bit. However, when he made his way over to the fish net, there it was, a large fish lying quietly inside. But this time, Dub didn't boast or celebrate like before. Why not? Well, if you've been watching the previous episodes, you already know the reason. Only after giving the fish a solid whack did he finally turn to show it to us. First, he cleaned the fish at the riverbank, then brought it back to camp, deboned it, and cut it into neat pieces. He layered it with a few sprigs of spruce branches and began the smoking process. Finally, Dub had a proper meal to enjoy and a bit of time to rest. As he was heading back to the river to fetch some water, something massive caught his eye on the other side of the lake. Through his camera lens, he saw it clearly. A moose, peacefully munching on the grass, completely unaware of Dub's presence or the plan he was forming. Quietly, Dub grabbed his camera and bow, then set off to get closer. But by the time he reached the spot, the moose had vanished into the woods without a sound. The sky had turned dark, and Dub had no choice but to call a night and head back to camp. After all, the wilderness becomes far more dangerous under the cover of night. Although Timber had stockpiled plenty of meat, he still couldn't feel at ease. A pack of wolves had been lurking nearby, their howls echoing through the long, cold nights. The constant noise kept him on edge. He couldn't sleep no matter how tired he was. When daylight finally broke, Timber began scanning the area around his shelter. Out on the grass in front, he spotted numerous fresh wolf tracks. It was clear that the hidden stash of food he'd stored inside the camp was attracting the pack. He decided to circle the camp to investigate further. While doing so, he suddenly noticed a new set of tracks. Not wolves this time, but a grizzly bear. That instantly sent a chill down his spine. If he encountered a bear face-to-face, escaping would be nearly impossible. Wolves in front, grizzlies on the right, both predators silently waiting for the perfect moment to strike. It seemed clear Timber needed to return to his shelter and come up with a solid plan fast. Dub has always been on the lookout for a moose, the ultimate key to winning the competition. At this hour, the sun hadn't even risen yet. This was the prime time when moose often forage near rivers and streams, so Dub focused his search in those areas. But at the moment, Dub was extremely hungry, and he needed to find an easier source of food first. As he returned to camp, a sudden fluttering of wings from a tree branch caught his attention. Based on the sound, it had to be a grouse. He grabbed his bow and carefully crept toward the noise, making sure not to alert the bird. With a perfectly placed arrow, the grouse dropped, and just like that, Dub had dinner in his hands. Sarah has recently been busy finishing up her shelter. Whenever hunger strikes, she warms herself up with a bit of chicken broth. The days have been passing by joyfully, but with winter fast approaching, she knows she has to head out and gather more food. Right in front of her camp lies a field of wild rice, with plenty of grains growing at the top of the stalks. She collected as much as she could and brought it back to her shelter. After spending the entire evening working on it, she finally managed to extract a small amount of starch. She tossed it into a pan and cooked it until golden brown. The aroma and texture were surprisingly similar to bread. One thing's for sure, it's edible, and even better, it tastes really good. William's shelter is nearly finished. Just a few final touches and it'll be complete. A flock of geese flying south signals that winter is drawing near. Among the 4 remaining contestants, he's the only one without any food left. So today's top priority is finding something to eat. First, he prepared a new fishing rig, hoping this time he'll finally catch something. Once that was done, he headed to the riverbank to put his fishing skills to the test like a true outdoorsman. If he wins the $500,000 prize, he could retire early and spend more time with his family, a thought that motivates him through the hunger. No one knows how much time had passed, but finally, a fish took notice of his bait. With a precise flick of the wrist, William reeled it in and landed it on the shore. Now that he had something to eat, all he wanted was to hurry back to camp and dig in right away. Sarah is soaking up the last sunny days before winter arrives. Although she deeply misses her mom and her little family, the thought of that $500,000 prize pushes her to stay strong and keep going. Today, she's decided to set a few traps to see if she can catch a beaver. She's noticed there are quite a few of them in the area. If she's lucky enough to catch one, it could provide a rich source of protein and fat, and the pelt could even be used to make clothing. She carefully crafts a snare trap and places it right where the beavers often come ashore to sunbathe. Now, it's just a matter of waiting. The moment one steps into the loop, the trap will trigger. Today, Dub is preparing the spruce grouse he caught. After cleaning the bird and removing the head and tail, he turns it into a hearty pot of soup. The blood of birds like this is rich in sodium, which helps balance water and minerals in the body, so tossing everything into the pot and boiling it is the best choice. While waiting for the soup to cook, Dub steps outside to scan the area. Suddenly, he spots a black wolf staring directly at him, and not far behind, a few massive gray wolves are lingering too. Thankfully, after a tense moment, they simply turn and walk away. The danger has passed for now. With a sigh of relief, Dub heads back to camp. It's finally time to enjoy his well-earned grouse soup. Every morning, William loves taking a moment to admire the beauty of nature surrounding his shelter. After soaking in the peaceful scenery, he sets off to check his traps. And to his surprise, even though he hasn't finished yesterday's fish, today he's caught a rabbit. At this rate, his camp will soon be overflowing with meat. After cleaning the rabbit, he decides to cook part of it into a stew for dinner and save the rest for tomorrow. After all, what could be better than going to bed with a full stomach in the middle of the wilderness? As the final flock of wild geese takes flight to the south, winter has officially arrived. Timber, with plenty of moose meat stockpiled, feels quite at ease. Before the temperatures drop too drastically, he seizes the chance to head outside and gather as much grass as possible to insulate his shelter for extra warmth. To finish off his preparations, and perhaps to make a statement, he mounts a massive moose head right at the entrance of his home, wild and rugged, just like his spirit. Timber is currently the top contender for the championship. He managed to take down a moose weighing over 1,000 pounds on his own and has stockpiled an enormous amount of meat. William stayed patient with his fishing setup and finally caught enough fish to keep himself going day after day. Dub works quietly but effectively. He keeps placing traps and has caught rabbits and grouse, even facing down wolves in the forest. And Sarah, with her incredible resourcefulness, harvested wild rice and managed to make bread in the middle of the wilderness. She's clearly a warrior to be reckoned with. So, who do you think will win this grueling season of survival? Let us know in the comments below. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss any of the thrilling developments coming up next. Let's get started. Day 30 of the Survival Challenge has arrived. Timber is starting to feel the brutal chill of the Arctic winter. In an effort to increase his food reserves, today he's heading to the riverbank to check his fish traps before the water freezes completely. As soon as he pulls the line up, a large fish is already waiting for him. This species is packed with nutrients, and its meat is deliciously sweet. To keep the fish fresh for longer, Timber ties a rope through its mouth and lowers it back into the water. The other end of the rope is secured to a wooden stake. This method keeps the fish alive but prevents it from swimming away, also helping to protect it from food thieves. Timber heads back to his shelter to prepare lunch, fish soup with smoked moose meat. A short while later, he suddenly hears the sound of a tree branch snapping nearby. Could it have been a bird? Or perhaps one of his traps was triggered. He hurries back to the river, and sure enough, he's caught another fish. This one is even bigger than the one from earlier this morning. Like before, he carefully ties a rope through its gills and lets it back into the water to stay alive. This way, the fish remains a valuable food source for the coming days. While Timber is away, a small, curious bird visits his camp and begins looking for scraps of food. But before long, Timber returns, and the startled bird quickly flies off, leaving him alone to enjoy his warm, hearty fish soup. Good morning, William. The weather outside is freezing, so he's in no rush to leave the warmth of his cozy blanket. He wants to enjoy that comfort just a little longer before heading out in search of food. As the first rays of sunlight begin to shine through, William finally steps out of his shelter and sets off to hunt for today's meal. Checking the fish net by the river seems like a good idea. Surprisingly, the fish he had hung on a tree a few days ago was discovered by a curious marten. Luckily, the fish was stored inside a bag, so the little intruder couldn't get to it. Though the marten's actions were somewhat cute, William had no choice but to shoo it away to protect his precious catch. He brings the fish back to camp and starts preparing a hearty fish soup, a dish that not only nourishes the body, but also helps him stay warm in the cold. However, his food reserves are now completely gone. If he can't find another source of protein soon, he may have to go to bed hungry. Timber had the largest stockpile of food among the contestants, which unfortunately made him a prime target for food thieves lurking nearby. If he didn't come up with a solution soon, all his efforts to preserve food would go to waste. After some careful thought, he finally came up with an idea: build a new food storage shelter. The first and most important step was to move his supplies to a safer, drier location. Then, he gathered dry logs to begin constructing the storage shelter. Around the shelter, he built 4 wooden walls, each over 1 meter high. However, the gaps between the wooden planks posed a problem. They were perfect entryways for mice and other small pests. So Timber came up with a clever fix. He took moose hide and stuffed it into the cracks to seal them completely. With this method, not even ants could get inside. Finally, he built a sturdy door to finish off the storage unit. With that, a nearly perfect food shelter was complete, and Timber could finally rest easy, knowing his supplies were well protected. As usual, Dub woke up early and headed down to the riverbank to fish. There was also a chance he might spot a moose, if luck was on his side. But the weather had grown colder, and the fish had moved into deeper waters. His fishing net came up empty, so his only option now was to fish the old-fashioned way, with a rod and line. At his usual spot, he cast his bait and sat patiently, waiting. Suddenly, he heard movement nearby. Quickly, he grabbed his bow and took cover. It turned out to be a moose, standing on the far side of the river. Unfortunately, the distance was too great. Even if he managed to hit it, the arrow would likely only injure the moose, not take it down. Dub could only hope that the animal might decide to cross the river toward him. But that was just wishful thinking. The moose slowly wandered out of sight, leaving Dub with a sense of regret. With a sigh, he returned to his spot and continued waiting, hoping the fish would eventually bite. The first snowstorm of the season has finally arrived, covering the vast landscape in a blanket of white. The harsh winter has officially begun. Today, a family of moose paid a visit to Timber's camp. But don't worry, he has no intention of harming them. He simply wants to share this special moment with you and me. Sarah, who comes from a cold region, feels right at home in this freezing weather. She already knows exactly how to survive in such bone-chilling conditions. William is also feeling excited. This is his first time melting snow to get drinking water. Meanwhile, Dub has plans of his own to face the brutal Arctic climate. It was a clear, sunny morning. Sarah was inside her shelter, planning ahead for the coming days. She felt confident, drawing from her survival experience in the Alaskan wilderness. Later, she grabbed her bow and headed into the forest to hunt. But first, she decided to check her fishing trap. Unfortunately, there was nothing to collect today, so she continued deeper into the forest, hoping to spot some game. Rabbits and even small rodents were still possible targets. Every bit of food counts in a place like this. Timber spotted a marten lurking near the food storage. No doubt, it had come to steal meat. But luckily, the storage shed was solid and well built, so the little creature had no chance of getting in. Still, Timber knew that if a wolf or bear showed up, things could end very differently. So today's mission was to reinforce the shed and make it even more secure. He carved 2 grooves into thick logs, then fit another log tightly into the notches, securing it with several smaller pieces of wood to lock everything in place. Even a bear would have a hard time breaking in now. With the job done, Timber headed down to the river to bring in the fish he had stored there earlier. But to his shock, the rope tied to the post and the massive fish were both gone. It was a devastating loss. That fish could have fed him for several days. He hurried over to check the other fish trap, and thankfully, one fish was still there. He quickly took care of it and brought it safely back to the shed. As nightfall approached, the temperature began to drop sharply. Staying in the camp was the safest choice now. William had set up several snare traps along the riverbank, hoping to catch a beaver. Today, he headed out to check them. As he approached the river, he saw a small beaver already caught in one of the traps. He paused. Something about the little creature tugged at his heart. He hesitated, unsure if he could go through with it. But after a long moment, he knew he had no choice. This was the only way to keep going in the competition. After dispatching the animal, William carefully removed the inedible parts and divided the meat into portions. He stored some of it in a rocky crevice, covering it with stones to preserve it. The rest he planned to turn into a rich, warming beaver stew, a much-needed source of nourishment and heat in this brutal cold. Timber, as usual, was busy, constantly dealing with troublemakers lurking around his meat storage. Once again, he had to personally rush out and chase away an intruder sneaking near his precious food supply. Afterward, he made his way down to the river, wondering if any fish were waiting to be brought home. While searching along the riverbank, he stumbled upon the wooden stick he once used to tie up a giant fish. The rope was still there, but had the fish escaped? Using another stick, he carefully pulled it up, and to his surprise, the fish was still there. This time, he didn't hesitate. He quickly finished it off before anything could go wrong. Then, he returned to camp and safely stored the fish in his food stash. At this rate, with all the food he stockpiled, you might think Timber's planning to retire out here, living out the rest of his days in the wilderness, well-fed and completely unbothered. Wouldn't that be the dream? After days of munching on plants and going full vegetarian, Dub finally made up his mind. Today he will catch a fish and break the curse of leafy meals. He headed down to the river, scanning the area carefully, eyes darting from left to right as he checked the fishing nets. And finally, success. A fish had finally wandered into his trap. After cleaning the catch and resetting the net, he returned to camp to stash it safely. But Dub wasn't done yet. He headed back to the river to check his fishing line. And guess what? Another fish was already hooked. Who knows how long it had been waiting there? He reeled it in, finished it off, and brought it back to camp, proudly hanging it up. But wait, just a little while later, Dub returned with yet another fish. Is someone cheating here? Nah, must be pure skill and luck, right, buddy? Good morning, Timber. He's already busy cutting up leftover moose hide to line the storage shed, then using it as a partition wall for his kitchen. This clever setup helps keep smoke from spreading through the entire shelter. Even though Timber has the most food of all the contestants, life out here is undeniably lonely. He talks to himself to pass the time, or heads down to the river to fish, just to break the monotony. Today, he's out checking his traps. He knows better than to get too comfortable with the stocked pantry. Hunting and fishing are daily routines for him. Timber treats this wilderness life like a peaceful retreat, almost like a vacation. Unfortunately, today's traps came up empty. But just as he reaches the spot where he once hunted a moose, he finds something surprising. The discarded rib bones are still there. With a few swings of his axe, he chops the bones down to make improvised fish hooks, adding to his arsenal of river traps before the surface completely freezes over. It's the morning of day 41 in the competition. This is the moment Sarah feels most confident. After all, she's from Alaska. Harsh winters and rugged terrain are nothing new to her. But despite her experience, hunting has brought her little success lately. And if that continues, it's only a matter of time before she'll have to tap out. Before starting the day's work, Sarah boils some water, a small ritual that both hydrates and warms her body. After that, she heads outside to saw firewood for heat. But suddenly, a sharp pain beneath her ribs forces her to stop. She knows exactly what's happening. The aches, the weakness, they're not a mystery. It's hunger. Her body has been without protein for days, and it's starting to break down. But the cruel irony is this. She needs strength to hunt, but she needs food to have that strength. And if she can't turn the tide soon, This journey might come to an end sooner than she hoped. It's past 11 p.m., and Dub is jolted awake by a gnawing hunger. Luckily, he has plenty of fish stored in his cache, enough to quiet the growling in his stomach. While waiting for his fish soup to cook, Dub makes a bold decision. He's going to check the fishing nets. Right now, in the middle of the night, he straps a headlamp onto his forehead and steps out into the freezing darkness. The air is filled with the eerie howls of wolves in the distance. It's unnerving, terrifying even, but Dub pushes forward. He's afraid of those vicious predators, no doubt, but he won't let that fear stop him. When he reaches the riverbank and inspects the net, disappointment hits. There's nothing there. Just as he turns back toward camp, he instinctively reaches into his pocket and realizes something dreadful. His glasses, his only pair, have broken again. Without them, Dub is nearly blind. Suddenly, the icy wilderness feels a whole lot more dangerous. Whatever plans he had for the rest of the night are now on hold. Fixing his glasses just became priority number one. Meanwhile, Timber is still wide awake. Lately, a sneaky gang of mice has been raiding his dried meat stash, forcing him to stay alert and find ways to deal with the little thieves. With winter tightening its grip, the days are getting shorter, and that shift has thrown off his usual routine. Sleeping too much feels uncomfortable, and honestly, a bit depressing, so Timber looks for small ways to keep himself occupied during these long, cold nights. Surprisingly, he's decided to adopt one of the mice. Yes, instead of chasing it away, he's been keeping a tiny one around as a companion. A little bit of company, however small, goes a long way in the wild. At this point, Dub's glasses frame was severely damaged, completely beyond repair. So, he found a few branches that were just the right shape to craft a new frame. After melting some paracord to use as hot glue, he carefully stuck the lenses onto the wooden frame. A wild edition pair of glasses was born. In the middle of the night, Sarah's chest pain flared up again, making it impossible for her to sleep. The pain seemed to be getting worse, and it was eerily similar to Isaiah's case. He had to leave the competition because of the same chest symptoms. If this continues, it could become life-threatening. After a night of agonizing pain, Sarah still didn't want to give up. She knew she had to get outside quickly and find food. But hunting in the middle of winter is no easy task. This is the time when most animals stay hidden in their dens, hibernating. There was nothing for her to catch. At that moment, a wave of disappointment washed over her, and the persistent chest pain crushed her willpower. She had no reason to stay any longer. Without hesitation, she reached for the satellite phone and announced her decision to withdraw from the competition. Farewell, Sarah, a brave and fearless warrior. Day 43. Only 3 contestants remain in the competition. William heads to his hidden food stash to retrieve the remaining beaver meat for another decent meal. This food hiding method has proven incredibly effective. No animal, not even mice or martens, has managed to get to it. With food becoming increasingly scarce in the winter, William only eats one of the beaver's legs. Now, he's waiting for the ice on the river to thicken. Once it can support his weight, he'll resume fishing. This process takes a lot of time, so he needs to be prepared with enough food and must ration it carefully. Day 45. The temperature has now dropped to -6 degrees Celsius, cold enough to freeze water. As usual, William goes out to check his traps. Unfortunately, he hasn't caught anything in the past few days, so he's been surviving on the small stash of food he had hidden. Noticing some bird tracks near his food cache, he quickly rushes over to inspect it. Getting to the stash under the rocks isn't easy, but he patiently removes them one by one. And then nothing. There's not a single piece of meat left inside. It's all been stolen. Shocked and unable to believe it, he frantically digs through the cache again, hoping to find something. But once again, he finds nothing. This loss hits him hard. Without food, the chances of him staying in the competition grow slimmer by the hour. Timber, what are you up to? Turns out he's crafting some fish hooks in preparation for his next fishing session. Since it's a family secret technique, he can only show us the final product once he's done. For now, all we can see is him pounding on some moose rib bones, around 100 of them, before moving on to sharpening each one carefully. And there we have it. The final result looks great. Seems like Timber has quite the talent for making hooks by hand. After finishing a few hooks, he chews on some dried meat, then heads out to check his traps. He's got 5 snare traps set up nearby, but until now, nothing has been caught. Today, though, he finally gets lucky and catches a snowshoe hare. After removing the inedible parts of the rabbit, he returns to camp and enjoys a hot, fragrant bowl of rabbit stew. Truly, some people can't eat all the meat they have, while others are still searching for their first bite. Here he is, the man who hasn't had food for days. To make things worse, his hidden stash was recently stolen. If he can't find something to eat today, he'll almost certainly have to withdraw from the competition. Today, he plans to build a ladder to ensure his safety while fishing on the frozen river. But suddenly a grouse flies by. No hesitation. He grabs his trusted grouse hunting tool and immediately follows the prey. This is the same tool he's used in previous episodes to catch many grouse. And today is no different. In the blink of an eye, he captures his target with ease. He quickly plucks the feathers and removes the insides, getting everything ready for a hearty grouse stew. It's now day 47, and Dub is going through some of the darkest days of this competition. He's been suffering from stomach pain and nausea for several days. But as a survival expert, he refuses to let the pain defeat him. Just as planned, after 3 full days of resting indoors, he's finally recovered. After taking a deep breath of fresh air, he heads out to check his fish traps. As expected, no fish. With the weather getting colder, the fish have likely migrated to deeper waters. Still, he has a few fish left in his reserves, so food isn't an immediate concern. He heads back to camp and cooks up a hot fish soup, perfect to restore his energy and warm his body. Once he's refueled, he'll start thinking about how to find more food next. By day 51 of the competition, Timber was fishing using the handmade hooks he crafted himself. But luck wasn't on his side. He still hadn't caught anything. All he could do was return to shelter to warm up. In the cozy warmth of his tent, he began carving small wooden toys, gifts for his kids when he finally returns home. Even though he's been eating well, he's lost a lot of weight since the first day of the challenge. The next morning, as usual, he headed to the river to check his fish traps. He approached his fishing rod and began pulling in the line. To his surprise, there it was, a fish waiting on the hook. He had finally caught his first fish using his homemade hook. Right now, Timber has the largest food reserve out of all the remaining contestants. As long as he avoids illness or wild animal attacks, it seems almost impossible for him to lose. On a snowy and foggy morning, it looked like something had been caught in Dub's fishing net. It turned out to be a giant whitefish, so big it could feed him for at least a week. For now, he just needs to hold out until the ice thickens enough for safe fishing. Although only 3 contestants remain, the top-tier survival skills they've all shown suggest that this could become the longest-running competition in the show's history. The competition entered its 55th day, and at this point, the most comfortable contestant was probably Timber. He had dried meat to eat and a storage full of fish. As usual, he left camp to check his traps, hoping to catch something. After a while, he reached his trap location, only to be deeply disappointed. One snare had been triggered, but the prey had escaped. The rest of the traps were completely empty. Even though the moose he caught could sustain him for up to 100 days, Timber always tried to find more food, just in case something stole his supplies. While he was warming himself by the fire, he suddenly heard loud noises coming from his food storage. He rushed out and saw a wolverine. Without hesitation, he grabbed his axe and ran toward the creature to chase it away. On the morning of day 56, Timber followed the footprints left the night before and discovered that all of his fishing bait had been stolen. Although the creature hadn't reached his meat storage yet, Timber wanted to be cautious. Determined to eliminate the threat before it could return, he decided to hunt the animal down. He tracked its footprints to a hidden spot about 200 meters from his camp. There, he began setting up as many snares as possible, fully committed to catching the thief once and for all. It's now day 57. Ever since William caught that grouse, his spirits have improved greatly. He's full of plans for the coming days, and the first task today is fishing by the river. Thanks to the bridge he built earlier, he can easily walk out to the middle of the river. He drills a hole in the ice and drops his bait. Then, he starts a fire nearby and prepares a meal, the leftover grouse from a few days ago. It's the last of his food reserves, as the stockpile back at his shelter is now completely empty. Just as he takes a bite of the juicy meat, the fishing rod makes a sound. Without hesitation, he rushes over and carefully pulls the line, making sure not to lose the catch. It's a huge fish, probably the biggest one he's caught so far. He quickly cleans the fish and removes the inedible parts. But instead of carrying the entire fish back to camp, worried it might get stolen like before, he ties it with a rope and lowers it into the river at the same spot where he set his net. This way, the cold water will keep it fresh for longer, and it's much safer than storing it inside the shelter. Timber found a large moose antler and tied it to a piece of driftwood, planning to turn it into a musical instrument. He wanted something to play whenever there was nothing else to do, something to lift his spirits. It seems he's really excited about this self-made string instrument. He plays it day and night, pouring his energy into each note, creating melodies right in the heart of the wilderness. Lately, William has been limiting his time outside the camp. With daylight hours growing shorter and nights stretching longer, the cold outside has become almost unbearable. At the break of dawn, he quietly made his way to the frozen riverbank, planning to carve out a new fishing hole. Every move had to be precise. One misstep, and he could fall right into the icy water below. Once he dropped the baited line, the trap was set. Next, he started building a makeshift freezer out of ice blocks from the river itself. He carefully carved and stacked the blocks into a rectangular shape. Once the lid was added, it was done. A frozen fish locker, crafted right on the river. Looks like his catch now has a brand new home. Bet that fish is thrilled. It was a beautiful morning, and finally he set out to do some fishing. Thanks to his homemade snowshoes, he made his way to deeper waters with ease. Once there, he used his axe to carve a hole through the thick ice. It took a while, but he eventually broke through. A good sign, actually, since it meant the ice was thick enough to walk on safely. But things weren't looking good. His food supply back at camp was running dangerously low. If he couldn't catch anything today, he might have to go to bed hungry. So he waited and waited. Half a day passed. Still nothing. No fish even nibbled at the bait. With his fingers numb and the cold creeping into his bones, Dub had no choice but to head back to camp. And then came the worst part. The only food he had left was a piece of fish tainted by mouse droppings a few days earlier. He had tried to avoid it, holding out hope for something better. But now, there were no other options. So, with a heavy heart and an empty stomach, Dub cooked the contaminated fish. Because in this game, you eat or you go home. Day 61 has arrived, and if there's anyone smiling right now, it's Timber. His food storage is packed, his firewood is stacked high. Life in the wild doesn't get much better than this. Today, Timber decides to do a full inventory of his supplies. He carefully sorts the meat into two groups. The softer cuts go into the shelter for extra protection, while the rest are left stored in the main cache. That's when he notices something troubling. Some of the thick slices of dried meat have started to mold. It's not a huge amount, but even so, every single piece is precious out here. Throwing them away would mean tossing out part of his hard-earned treasure. So, Timber takes no chances. He sets aside the moldy portions for treatment. After all, this stash is his lifeline. With a stockpile like that and his sharp survival instincts, Timber might just be the man to beat in this brutal competition. Today, Dub is once again out on the frozen river, determined to catch some fish. But this time, he's trying a new method. He's weaving a net. With daylight hours growing shorter by the day, he knows he has to move fast. He carefully chops through the thick ice to create a hole, then lowers his handmade net into the freezing water, hoping a fish will wander into the trap. Not stopping there, he digs another hole nearby to try line fishing as well. Anything to improve his chances. Dub isn't just doing this to survive. He's here for something more, $500,000, to pay off his mother's debts. That thought keeps him going, even as the cold bites through his gloves. And the silence from the holes tells him he's caught nothing again. As the sky darkens and the wind picks up, he finally admits defeat and returns to camp. His hands empty and his heart heavy. 2 days. No fish. No food. No hope. He tries to distract himself, to stay positive, but eventually, the weight of it all becomes too much. Despite his best efforts, the tears come quietly and they don't stop. Day 62 of the challenge, and Timber is out ice fishing on the frozen lake. He still has 2 steel hooks and a few handmade fishing lines left. He starts by using his axe to chisel a hole through the thick sheet of ice, then drops a baited line into the freezing water. But he doesn't stop there. He moves to another spot, digs a second hole, and sets another line to boost his chances of landing a catch. Out here, every opportunity counts. After setting his traps, Timber heads back to camp, carrying a small bundle of dry firewood. He starts a fire to warm himself. But suddenly, the flames roar to life, much stronger than expected. Thinking quickly, he grabs a pot of water and slams it down over the blaze, trying to smother the fire before it can spread to his shelter. Moments later, the fire is finally under control. Crisis averted. Today, during a hunting trip, William once again came across a grouse. He reached for his trusty bird-catching stick, and just like before, it delivered him a hearty meal. A lucky start to what would turn out to be a very rewarding day. Riding that wave of good fortune, he made his way to the river to check on his fish trap. With hope building in his chest, he slowly pulled the trap out of the water. And sure enough, inside was a large fish. It was a total win for William. He took the fish and stored it carefully in his homemade ice refrigerator, adding more blocks of ice to reinforce the walls and keep everything safe. But just as he was about to head back to camp, he spotted a weasel sneaking around, clearly trying to steal his food. Luckily for William, his reinforced icebox was solid. The weasel left empty-handed. Another long, exhausting day has passed, and right now, Dub is truly struggling with survival. It's been days since he last caught a fish. If things don't start turning around soon, there's a real chance he might have to tap out and head home. But today, he returns to the frozen river, determined to give it one more try. He drills several holes in the thick ice, then carefully sets up his baited hooks. Not stopping there, he picks a nearby spot to sit and fish, allowing him to keep an eye on the other traps at the same time. Time passes slowly until finally, one of the lines starts to move. He rushes over, his hands steady but hopeful. Dub gently pulls the line, and success. A large fish breaks the surface. Just like that, everything changes. The gloom that had clouded his face for days is now replaced by a bright smile. The sudden flare-up from yesterday's fire has left Timber's shelter partially damaged. So today, he's focusing on repairs. He carefully takes down the moose hide walls, then inspects every inch for small holes and weak spots. Each tier is patched up with care, because out here, even the tiniest draft can be dangerous. Overall, Timber's situation seems pretty solid. He has food, he has firewood, and his shelter is still standing. But there's one major concern: his weight. Even though he's been eating regularly, he's visibly thinner, down 30 pounds since the beginning of the challenge. If this trend continues, he may not pass the next medical check. It's now day 65, and the final 3 contestants are still holding strong. The temperature has dropped to a chilling 9 degrees Fahrenheit. Today, Timber heads down to the river to check his fishing traps. On the way, he spots a marten perched on a tree branch. It almost seems to greet him before silently disappearing into the snowy woods. The snow is deeper today, and while the river hasn't fully frozen over yet, it's slippery and dangerous. Every step requires caution, but the traps hold nothing. No fish, no movement, just silence. Disappointed, Timber starts the trek back to camp. He's been out in the snow too long. His feet are starting to go numb. Each step becomes more painful. By the time he reaches camp, his toes are nearly frostbitten. Thankfully, it's not too severe. With fire and rest, he should recover. Morning of day 66. Once again, William manages to catch a grouse, using nothing more than his handmade stick. By now, that simple tool has helped him bring down 7 grouse, more effective than a bow and arrow. After plucking the feathers and cleaning out the bird, he heads down to the river to check his fishing net. Everything feels still, too quiet, until he pulls up the net. 1 fish, then 2. That makes 4 fish total, counting the 2 already tucked away in his homemade freezer. With this kind of stockpile, William is gaining a serious advantage, as this place prepares to sink into 6 months of darkness. Early morning, and Dub is already on the move. With his food supply completely gone, he has no choice but to check the fishing traps, hoping today won't be another day of hunger. He reaches the first line and begins to pull. A fish. Luck is finally on his side. After subduing his catch, Dub heads to the next trap. Another fish. It's turning out to be a very lucky day. He stores part of his catch in a hanging pouch, suspended from a tree to keep it safe. The rest he takes back to camp. Today, Dub gets to eat fish soup. And for once, he's not going to bed hungry. Day 68. Timber has been keeping an eye on the movements of moose. But now, they've completely disappeared. He suspects they've migrated toward Jake's territory. Given Jake's strength, he figures Jake could easily take one down. What Timber doesn't know is that Jake tapped out back on day 21. Today's task is gathering firewood. The cold is getting worse. The need for warmth is now more urgent than ever. He collects as much as he can, preparing for whatever the weather brings. Back at camp, he lies down by the fire, soaking in a rare moment of comfort. But then, a burning sensation in the soles of his feet. To his shock, the heat has melted the soles of his boots. Luckily, the inner lining is still intact. After fixing up his boots, Timber heads out to the frozen lake to check his fish lines. With axe in hand, he breaks through the thick ice and slowly begins pulling up the line. Then, there it is, a big, beautiful fish wriggling at the end of the hook. It's been a long time since he's felt this kind of joy, a hard-earned catch in the dead of winter. He cleans the fish and makes his way back to camp. By the firelight, the smell of roasted fish fills the air. His hands warm, his stomach full. By day 71, Dub had a rough night. Something had come creeping around his camp. Judging by the tracks it left behind, he was certain it was a marten, a clever little thief of the forest. Feeling uneasy, he rushed over to check his food cache. Thankfully, it was still untouched. But just moments after returning to his shelter, he noticed something else. A piece of fish had been dragged away. Another thief. With so many hungry visitors around, there's no way to guard everything at once. So Dub decided to outsmart them. He split the fish into several portions, wrapped each one in an old shirt, and prepared to hang them high in the trees. Once again, Timber seemed to be thoroughly enjoying his new hobby. In just 2 days, he had created an entire army of wooden toy soldiers for himself. But of course, he didn't forget his daily responsibilities. As usual, he headed down to the river to check his fish traps. He carefully examined each one, but there wasn't a single sign of movement. Disappointed, he reset the traps and made his way back to camp. That night, something fell off. His feet were starting to go numb. They felt ice cold, yet when he touched them, they burned with a strange, searing heat. A terrifying thought crossed his mind. He might be suffering from thermal burns caused by extreme cold. If the injury was serious, it could eventually lead to amputation. After a sleepless night due to the pain in his foot, Timber realized just how serious things might become. Usually, staying inside the shelter would ease the numbness. But every time he stepped outside, the cold would make it worse. The freezing temperatures only aggravated the problem. To prevent the situation from getting any more serious, he knew he had 2 options: raise the temperature inside the shelter, or keep his body moving to stimulate circulation. Sometimes, even something as simple as a sip of hot tea can help bring warmth back to the body. Day 74. Today is William's son's birthday. For the first time in 15 years, he can't be there to wish his boy a happy birthday. All he can do is pray to God, hoping his son is happy, healthy, and safe. He hopes this challenge will end soon, so he can return to the people he loves most. After building his morning fire, William walks to his storage shed and cuts off the head of a fish to make soup. It's a simple meal, but today it carries deeper meaning. After simmering it for over an hour, the fish head soup is finally ready. He eats it slowly, gratefully, thinking of home. With plenty of food in storage, Dub spends most of his time resting inside his shelter. It's the best way to stay warm and conserve energy. Today is physical check-in day. One by one, the contestants are checked for health and safety, and all of them are cleared to continue. But not everyone is happy. Dub had secretly hoped that the plane would land near his camp and announce him as the winner. Instead, it just flew overhead and disappeared into the distance. From that moment on, Dub's spirit began to collapse. Not physically, but deep inside. He felt like he couldn't hold on much longer. It's now day 76. With a bag full of moose meat, Timber is feeling pretty comfortable with his current life. The meat may be a little tough and chewy, but the taste? Absolutely worth it. Even with plenty of food stored away, he never stops searching for more. It's part of the daily rhythm now. Today, he heads back to the river to check his fishing traps. But despite all his efforts, not a single fish has taken the bait for days. Left with no other option, he grabs a piece of frozen fish from his reserve and makes a warm bowl of soup. Not exactly a feast, but enough to keep going. At the same time, William is feeling homesick, especially when thoughts of his wife come flooding in. He can't hold back the tears. All he wants now is for this challenge to end, so he can return home and enjoy a happy life with his family. Today, William sets out to check his rabbit traps, to see if any have been caught in the past few days. But nothing. The traps are completely empty. However, he notices something, a few small footprints in the snow, fresh ones. With renewed focus, he quickly moves some of his traps to this new location, hoping it will increase his chances of catching a rabbit. After resetting the traps, he heads to the river to check his fishing setup. Unfortunately, there's no fish today either. And to make things worse, he notices the water level has dropped. That's not a good sign. It's now day 78. The temperature has dropped to around minus 20 degrees Celsius. To fight off the boredom and homesickness, Timber has been crafting small wooden toys, something to play with during his downtime. It helps him forget, just for a while, about how much he misses home. As usual, he gets up and heads out to check his traps. But today, he's checking his rabbit snares instead of the fishing lines. He carefully walks through the snow to the trap site, and there it is. A rabbit has been caught. His first one. After cleaning and preparing the rabbit, he heads back to camp and enjoys a warm bowl of delicious rabbit stew. Meanwhile, on Dub's side, he's still tirelessly fishing, but again, he catches nothing. Another day of effort with no reward. He has no choice but to return to camp and rest. With his diet lacking, he's starting to feel colder every time he goes outside. If this food shortage continues and the weather gets any colder, he might not make it much longer. Back at camp, he uses the last bits of his fish meat to make a pot of fish stew, hoping it will restore some strength and help warm his body. But beyond the hunger and the cold, the crushing loneliness begins to take its toll. He hasn't spoken to anyone in a very long time, and that thought, that silence, keeps echoing in his mind, slowly unraveling his emotions. Another long night has passed. William is now preparing his strategy to survive the coldest days yet to come. He knows exactly what needs to be done. Gather as much food and firewood as possible. That's his only chance to win. First up, checking the rabbit trap. And this time, luck is finally on his side. After a long dry spell, he's caught a rabbit. He heads back to camp, starts a fire, and begins cleaning the animal, removing the inedible parts with practiced hands. Then, the rabbit goes into the pot. It simmers over the flames, filling the shelter with a warm, rich aroma. Now at last, he gets to enjoy a well-earned meal, one he caught, cleaned, and cooked with his own hands. In a different turn of events, after days of failing to catch any fish and completely running out of food, Dub found himself at a breaking point. The pressure, the silence. His heart was pounding faster with each moment. If only luck had been on his side, maybe things wouldn't have ended this way. In a state of panic, he made the call, reaching out to the production team, and requested to withdraw from the competition. They responded quickly. Within moments, a rescue team arrived and safely brought him home. Thank you and farewell, brave warrior Dub. We wish you good health and hope you'll continue to pursue your passion with the same heart and courage. After 83 long days, only 2 contestants remained. At this point, Timber was doing nothing more than staying in his shelter, eating dried meat, and gathering firewood. He still had plenty of food, more than enough to survive 100 days. But the truth was, he no longer felt the desire to win. He came here and did everything he had set out to do, and now he just wanted to go home. In the end, Timber picked up the satellite phone and officially announced his withdrawal from the competition. It was a truly unexpected ending. A contestant with plenty of food left, choosing to leave on his own terms. But for Timber, there was no regret. He had achieved everything he came for. After Timber announced his withdrawal, only one contestant remained, William. He was resting in his shelter when the production team suddenly arrived for a routine health check. As usual, they ran all the standard tests, and everything looked good. But this time, there was a surprise. They had brought his wife with them. She slowly walked up to him and gently patted his shoulder. He turned around, and in that moment, they embraced each other and laughed with joy. After so many days apart, William was finally reunited with his wife. And then, the production team made the official announcement. William was the winner of Season 11. Congratulations to the new king of the Ultimate Survival Challenge. A truly beautiful ending to an unforgettable journey.